Instead, I'd like to argue that our generation is the most emotionally literate generation so far. Hi, dearest overthinker. Welcome to episode 6 of the podcast. My name's Umber for those of you who are new here, and today we're going to be talking about emotional sobriety. Before we get started, I think it's really important to address how boomers have brought this to everyone's attention for a couple of years now, I'd like to say. I think there isn't a single Gen Z who hasn't experienced an individual over 40 passionately explain to them how our entire generation has a personality disorder, wherein we take things too sensitively, we're too traumatized, and we're too emotional, and that we could never sustain a job or a relationship if we went on this way. And whilst I'd like to argue with this case, I think in a certain vein, very, very certain vein, I mean, in 2 or 3% of scenarios, it might be true. And that's not because we are innately more emotional, that somehow 2000 onwards, the production of babies were just a little bit more with the emotional gene. I don't believe that to be the case, but because of something else. Instead, I'd like to argue that our generation is the most emotionally literate generation so far. And yeah, for the boomers who are watching this, I'm really, really sorry. That's just how I feel. But that's because we have access to a lot more resources. And also, I think a huge factor that plays into this is the fact that we can see other people's experiences or read about their experience and witness it. Especially social media, which has improved the access to this, right? In a lot of cultures, when social media didn't exist, there was a lot of taboo around speaking about your feelings, speaking about why you were angry. It was sort of brushed under the rug. But now, since we can see what other people experience a little bit better, empathize with other individuals, it makes us better at processing our emotions as well. And a lot of the times, those are the upsides of it. But the downsides might be that we might overcomplicate what we're feeling. And in the effort of processing our emotions, I believe we start to romanticize it. I know I do. I want to be part of that entire culture where people can so eloquently speak about the pain and their experiences. And I want to be part of that as well, because I feel like if I understand that and experience it, I can be part of that complexity. It shows my depth as an individual, but slowly it just becomes an observable exhibition of that rather than me actually healing and moving on from a certain thing. And I don't think that's a problem in every given instance. I don't think a good cry ever hurt anybody, and I think I when I'm sad and when I'm feeling really lonely and hurt, I relate to Adele a little bit better. Oh my god, when Driver's License by Olivia Rodrigo came out, I was sat at the back of my car I didn't have a license, but that girl was speaking to my soul. And I think that's really funny. Now The Visitor came out, oh my god. I haven't experienced anything like it at all in the slightest, but when I'm feeling a little bit sad, yes, I can relate to it. But sitting in this pit of negativity obviously isn't really productive, and beyond a certain given period of time, it gets a little bit ridiculous, and by no means should we substantiate what the boomers are saying, the slander against the entire generation, and because of that, we're going to talk about emotional sobriety today. So why do we feel as though a certain instance is deeper than it is? Why does it sometimes feel as though everything horrible that has ever happened to me in my life has been boiled down to this specific instance and explains everything, and suddenly my life's miserable? And it not necessarily lasts for a really long time, but why can I contemplate it over and over again for such a long period of time? It's because of the amygdala hijack. There is science behind this. Essentially, the amygdala, that the part of your brain that's responsible for rational thought. We went over this quite a bit in the previous episode. I'm going to link that to this episode as well. Go have a look. But that gets overrun by the brain's threat center, which tells us that something's wrong and we have to figure it out. It's our body's having a reaction to the instance, and we believe that to be the full truth. So, because our body has such a strong reaction to a certain emotion, certain situation, we believe it to be the entire story, which might not necessarily be the case. And an author named Viktor Frankl referenced to this in his book, The Man's Search for Meaning. It was a book that reflected on Viktor Frankl's experience in a Nazi death camp and other individuals that were present there as well. Essentially, he talks about, at the heart of his theory, it's known as logotherapy, which is this conviction that the primary human drive is not pleasure, rather, it is the pursuit of what we find meaningful. And I think that quite nicely describes why we sit with our emotions as long as we do. Emotions can no longer exist as is. There has to be an explanation and meaning behind it. Everything needs to be meaningful, and I think that that's very, very relevant to suffering and pain of any sorts. Because what is human suffering if you're not rewarded for it at the end? What if what if it exists just as is? It just seems so unjust and unfair. So we sort of sit with it, reflect on it again and again, revisit it, so that at the end we believe that yes, after this everything will be fine, I'll be rewarded in this manner, or the converse, where it's some long overdue karma for something you've done. And because of that, we're stuck in this sort of bubble and this sort of cage where we're consumed by our feelings and it takes over us. Even in the pursuit of processing it, it becomes us, because it's hard to draw the line. It's hard to draw the line of where we're aware of our feelings and to let that go, and where we sort of lose ourselves in understanding it. And I do think this rabbit hole of why this happened to me, what did I do to deserve it, is more predominant in Gen Z, specifically because we're more aware. We register things that happen around us much more. We understand our feelings. We are extremely self-aware as well. So when we do behave in a certain manner, all the dots connect. And the dots never seem to not connect. And because of that, we constantly revisit it again and again and again, trying to make sense of this huge masterpiece of all the possible things that could have gone wrong. And this brings me to my next point, where an emotion can exist as is. It does not have to have an elaborate explanation for it, not in every given instance. And you are not your feelings. Just because you behave angrily in a certain instance does not mean you're an angry person per se. And I think Rumi puts it across really tastefully when he says, "The reed flute is fire, not wind, be that empty." He's a really renowned poet, and his entire philosophy revolves around the fact that human beings are like the reed flute. They are a vessel, and the music that the reed flute makes is a result of human longing, human emotions, essentially feeling deeply. It's what makes human beings, and you should allow them to pass through. There is something that you will always go through. It's part of the human experience as is. But if you hold on to it, if you don't let it pass through you as a human being, it can't make the beautiful music that it does make. And I think that's the essence of emotional sobriety, where emotions exist as is without consuming us, without being an explanation for everything that's wrong with us. And that's good enough. Despite this, I think asking emotions to exist as is a extremely massive, superficial claim. I don't think that it is something that is attainable by any means. Yes, letting go of certain experiences, letting go of certain things, that's attainable. But I'm just saying, do not delve deeper and not to find explanations in certain experiences is not possible. The entire pursuit of mankind is to find meaning in our lives. That's the entire premise of religion. We have to make meaning out of our ambition, our longing, our suffering, our desire. So you can't just say that let things go, let things exist as is. So our emotions always do feel heavier, and the burden of that is always heavier when you're more aware of what's happening around you, why it might be possibly happening. So I think it might be a little bit more realistic to channel it in a healthier way. And for me, what always helps is speaking to someone, speaking to a friend about what I might be going through. And talking to a friend always helps, getting a different opinion, and just getting it off your chest makes you feel a little bit lighter. that's why I rant most of the times. I just want someone to understand me. Not even understand me, just hear me out, hear out my frustrations. And also, if your friend does come to you with something, ask them first if they want your unsolicited advice or just want, if they just want you to be a listening ear for them. Because if my friend were to start giving me unsolicited advice mid rant, it would not be a great time. Yeah. However, there might also be instances where you feel like what you're going through is really unique and people might not be able to understand your complexity and sensitivity, even if you have really close friends. And there might be instances where your friends aren't that close to you and they simply might just not get your experience, or some experiences might be too personal, which I think is completely understandable that you might not feel comfortable sharing. But writing them down or just verbalizing it in some manner might really help. Personally, for me, people don't know this, but I do vlog on the rare occasion where I really can't speak to anybody about how I'm feeling, or can't. And I don't trust journals. I don't trust journals at all. I'm so scared that someone might go through it. Back in the day, I used to write in my journal and then I used to, oh my god, I used a whole code system to make sure that no one got to it. But now I just vlog it, and this all brings me to the end of this episode. To conclude, emotional sobriety is just about not having that emotional dependency to function. You can let things pass and move forward from it. You are not a captive to your emotions, and that's essentially what it means. I'd also like to share a neurological finding which I thought was so interesting, which is that the chemical cycle of an emotion in the body lasts only 90 seconds. Yeah, apparently the rest of the time when we feel an emotion is just because of the narratives we spin around it, the stories we create, the explanations we find, not because we're actually experiencing that. And I think that's so crazy because we might not necessarily be able to help ourselves from building a narrative around an emotion because that's what comes quite naturally to us, but we might be able to choose the narrative which we want to create a little bit better when we understand that our emotion can only last for 90 seconds and it might not be as big as it is. So yeah, that's I'd also like to share a really interesting neurological finding, which is that the chemical cycle of an emotion in the body lasts only 90 seconds. The reason why we feel so strongly towards an emotion afterwards is just because of the narratives we spin around it, the stories we make out of it, the explanations we find. And we are in control of our narratives. We might not necessarily be able to help ourselves from building a narrative, but we can control how deep we read into a certain instance. And I think when we think about the fact that what we're experiencing, any emotion that we experience is just for 90 seconds, it's easier to think of letting it go, or easier to not take it as much to heart, personally. To end today's episode, I just want to say that just because you're having a bad day doesn't mean you've had a bad life or that you're going to have a bad life. And also, I have a really cute quote for you guys as well, which is that emotions are weather, you are the sky. The sky doesn't become the storm, it just holds it and then lets it pass. So yeah, emotional sobriety is essentially just that. And also, I think a great reason to work towards it is because why would we want to substantiate the claims of haters? But yeah, that's all from me, yours truly, Umber, and I will see you very, very soon, dearest overthinker. Bye-bye. Also, for those of you who have stayed this long, I also just wanted to show you the scarf I crocheted. I'm wearing it as a headband now, but isn't it so cute? It has a flower design on it as well. But yeah, that's basically it. Anyways, bye-bye. See you soon.